welcome to Vulva Stories with Vicky Crone. I'm here today with the wonderful Jalayla. Have I said that right?
Perfect, Jalayla. Yeah.
It's spelled so beautifully. It's spelled so beautifully. I love it. So thank you so much for being here. So to begin with, can you just introduce us to you and tell us a bit about you and what you do, please?
Yeah, of course. So as Vicky said, my name's Jalayla and I was born in London, and currently I'm a sex positive and women's rights virtual assistant. So I basically run my own business for people within the sexual wellness and women's rights industry. So that varies to doing work with sex workers, sex coaches, sex therapists, sex toy companies, women's health companies, sexual violence charities, a whole range of people. And I do things like admin, social media, community management, personal assistance, podcast assistance, just a whole bunch of different things sort of, for people within that industry.
Oh, I love it. And it's such a new position, isn't it? Because I know that on some of your socials, you've said, I've literally created this job out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But it is so needed. Like, so many people are speaking about this stuff now, and more open and more sex positive. Like, we need
100%.
more of that, don't we? So yes, absolutely, so happy for you. So
Thank you.
If we just take all of that work then and we consider your sex education growing up, where do you think, all of this, how was your sex education in school?
You know what? It wasn't the worst. I can't actually complain. So for context, I did my sex education in kind of like the late 2000s, so maybe like 2008. And sex education wasn't like 100% mandatory at that time. And like you were allowed to like pull your kids out, but we started when I was in year 5. So that is, how old am I? Maybe like 7 or 8 years old. And we did it for year 5 and year 6. And then in secondary school, we had something called citizenship, which covered like drugs, alcohol, sex, employment. It was like life skills, basically. So at primary school, it was okay. We learned what we needed to know. So we learned about periods and STIs and contraception and how to get pregnant, all kind of at a very scientific level. So we learned about all of that. Then sort of in year 6, it goes into just like a little bit more detail. Getting into secondary school, I don't know if everyone did this, but we did putting the condoms on like the penis demonstrators, which, as a 14-year-old, it was thrilling. Like we all thought it was just the funniest thing in the whole entire world. And I mean, I remember the lessons so well. I remember like a lot of the boys being like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that." I'm like, "Okay then," like, fine. So yeah, we did a lot of stuff around that. And as we got into secondary school, we learned more in detail about STIs, more in detail about sex, more in detail about contraception. Again, we didn't really, which I think a lot of people get, we learned nothing sort of about pleasure. It was all very just, oh, the man ejaculates and that's like, that will feel nice, but that's what will get you pregnant kind of thing. And maybe vaguely of like, a woman will have an orgasm, like when muscles contract, and that was kind of it. So it wasn't the worst. Like I've definitely heard worse education stories. But it could have been a lot better. But I am really thankful for like the sex education that I did have. I think I'm lucky. When I went off to university, I studied sociology. So a lot of the topics I picked were around like sex, porn, sex work, domestic violence, sexual violence. So I managed to learn a lot through that. And then I think as well, I think a lot of my friends are quite sexual from a young age as well. So there was like that sort of like real life experience as such that you could get information from that was like not the school and like not the internet at the time. Like we had the internet growing up, but it wasn't anything like what it is right now. And if we were reading stuff on the internet, I don't think it would have been trustworthy things to be reading as a 14-year-old.
I absolutely love that you describing what happened in school, like, and what they spoke about and stuff. It's completely different to my sex education. So you said you started around 2008. I left school in 2006. So you can imagine like the difference and how old I feel right now. So, even like the fact that they've actually mentioned orgasms and pleasure in there somewhere is like fascinating. That wasn't mentioned at all when I went through school. And then was there like speak of masturbation?
No, so not that I can remember. So I was thinking about this earlier, and I remember them talking about like boys getting wet dreams and explaining like what that was. But other than that, to my recollection, no, I don't think so. When we got into secondary school, I definitely don't think there was. I remember speaking to my friends about this, and they were all just like, no, like I don't remember that happening. So I think the most I can think of is, yeah, it is wet dreams. I think that's the closest that I think you can remember.
On a man, isn't it?
Yeah, like I said, it was very much like they wanted to teach us what we needed to know, but more from like the scientific point of view. It's like, well, you need to know what a period is, you need to know how you get pregnant, rather than it ever being sort of like pleasure based. It was all very scientific based, obviously in like a child friendly manner because we were like 7. But so which given what the current climate was at the time in regards to sex education and stuff like that, I am still really thankful that I actually had that decent of a set. And like, I remember that the teachers were like really comfortable talking about it as well. Like it didn't feel awkward or anything, which was quite nice. In secondary school, it was more awkward because there was like 30 of us, were all like 13, 14, 15, absolute menaces to society. So it was more a bit like, oh, but I don't want to ask this question because I've got so many people around me. But yeah.
Oh, that's great. Like, I didn't get the chance to put a condom on a banana in school. I'm so jealous.
Oh, we didn't even have a banana. We had a proper like penis demonstrator, not even a banana. We got the solid good stuff.
The good stuff. So if we what about the LGBT community? Did you learn anything about that in school? Like, what was your awareness?
No. So I would say growing up, it was something that I always kind of knew existed. So I would say like from a very young age, I was sort of just like I kind of knew I liked boys and girls. We can go into that in a bit more detail. Now I consider myself straight, but from primary school. So I was always sort of aware like that was a thing. Didn't really think too much of it. It was just something that existed. I didn't really have too many thoughts and feelings about it. When we got into secondary school, there was definitely stuff within citizenship where we learned about like gay people and gay rights and stuff like that. But again, it was kind of like very minor. And in terms of like, we obviously had like huge like anti-bullying campaigns at schools, as all of them do. So there was obviously mention of, we can't judge someone for their sexuality and things like that. But we didn't really learn too much of it. But I think, again, like I had friends who knew they were gay from when we were like 11, 12, 13 years old. So it was like that representation for me was always there just within my friendship group. I spent stupid amounts of time on Tumblr. So Tumblr back in 2012 was the hub for all things everything. So again, I got a lot of knowledge from there. That sort of like pop feminism from like Twitter, 2012 Twitter and Tumblr taught me like a lot. And then just like having people who were also also part of the LGBTQ plus community as well. It just I just learned things just growing up. So I'm really lucky with that, because school didn't teach us that really. It was just kind of as simple as don't bully people, and that was sort of it. I was like, okay, I knew that already, but thanks.
Okay, so Jalailah, could you tell us how old you are, please?
Yes, I'm 25 years old. So I'm turning 26 next month.
Perfect. Just for a bit of context, because you are I'm a millennial and you are from Generation Z. I think that's how you say it, because I have to always look up the years that people were born to get the generations. But just so from like a generational view, then if I view your generation as having a better sex education with wider awareness, and I think we've just discovered that you absolutely did. So even though there was more more access to information, more demonstrations, it was still lacking. So in your view, both professionally and personally, how does what does sexuality mean to you? Like, how does that present in our everyday lives? How important is that for people in their everyday lives, from a generational perspective? So if we first talk about you and your generation, how do you feel like sexuality presents in your generation?
Yes, so I think definitely we've had better sex education. Obviously, speaking from a personal point of view, I feel like I was quite lucky with mine. I know a lot of people that went to Catholic school and things like that. So their sex education, you know, they're still my age, but they actually didn't learn anything until they got to university at 19. So obviously I can just sort of speak behalf on like my little generational bubble that I know, and definitely it's much better. And I think in terms of how sexuality is presented, like, if again, I'm sort of have to base it on like my perspective of things. But I think people are so much more open, and like even like ignoring the fact, obviously, like I'm in the sex world because of my job, like taking myself out of it, when I just look at the past 10 years and my social circles and the people that I speak to, everyone is so much more open. And I think we're kind of learning just how much more natural it is, and how like these things do happen. And like I always say, like, you know, sex is the whole reason that we're all here on this planet, and the human race is literally like surviving. It's quite literally basically the only reason that we're here. So I think it's just being presented more openly and definitely more honestly. I think, when I look at the conversations that I have, that I've always had, to be fair, with my friends, it's just so much more open. And I think I am definitely still, funny, like if I am speaking to sort of people that are a lot older than me, I'm much more like, when people ask me what I do for work, I'm like, I'm just a virtual assistant. And I'm like, oh, what sort of businesses do you work for? I'm like, businesses, just businesses and people. Like, that's it. I'm still much more like, I don't want to have to get into a conversation that's just going to be uncomfortable or awkward, I think. So I think that answers your question.
Yes, it does. So do you think then that sort of being more open about sexuality and being allowed to sort of own your sexuality and explore your sexuality contributes to like your emotional well-being and how you know you present?
Absolutely. Well. So I mean, for me, like there's almost like no such thing as like well-being and sexual well-being. I think it all just comes under the same umbrella as such. Because, you know, being open sexually and having a positive sexual relationship with yourself and others, it all links into self-acceptance and confidence. And that, to me, like being confident is almost like the number one thing you can do for yourself. It can get you so far. It just really, I don't know, I think it just gives you like a bit of a head start. And also like well-being wise and health wise, you know, again, sexual health and health are the same thing. You know, if you've got an issue and you can't go to the doctor about it, that's you not looking after yourself. That's, you know, you don't know what that can develop into. And I think it's so important that people are comfortable. You know, there's people that still can't say the word vagina, and it's, you know, it's a part of our body that needs looking after. And if you break your leg, you're going to go to the doctors. And I think it should be the same with sexual health or intimate health or things like that. I just don't think it's
not a separate
it's just it shouldn't be a separate term. It's just part of your body. And even like if you've got issues with like your breasts or your bum and things like that, it should be something that's just okay, it's another body part, probably should go and get it checked out then, rather than, because I think also like a lot of the issues with those sort of areas sometimes aren't linked to sex at all in the slightest. But because there's that connotation of like boobs, bum, vagina, penis all being inherently sexual, people are like, oh no, like I can't go to the docs about that, even if it's got nothing to do with sex in the first place. I just think go on.
Do you see that difference in sort of like the generations before you, and do you see how that impacts like sort of their emotional well-being? Has this been present in your life or in your career?
So I would say more in my career, where I've just sort of seen articles, people talking on TikTok and just things like that from sort of older people where you know, they had a lump somewhere, or they noticed unusual discharge, or they noticed something like that and they didn't do anything about it, and then, you know, it turns out it was something a bit more serious. Obviously sometimes it's not, but and just sort of seeing things like that where like I like literally the second there's anything wrong with me, I'm like booking a doctor's appointment, to the extent like I've had like my parents be like, okay, maybe relax, like I don't think it's actually, but I'm like, no, I have to go. So for me it seems not silly. I don't want to say silly, because obviously if you have grown up around where it is taboo, you don't have the education behind it, you don't have anyone to talk to about it and things like that, then obviously like why would you go to the doctors when that's something that you are uncomfortable with? You've learned that. But for me it's just like it's another body part that needs sorting out. And I think that's where it comes into being like embracing your sexuality and having that like confidence and that self-acceptance and that self-love, where you're like, no, like I deserve to be in a healthy body, I deserve to be checked out, I deserve, like adequate medical care like everyone else. So yeah, I think it's more that.
Yeah, and for me, at my age, looking at you and hearing you say all these things, it's just like, you can just see the changes in our generations and what's happening with like the awareness. The more like people like us in our like positions, in our job positions, the more we scream and shout about this stuff, the more it's going to change. So it's just all changing for the better, and it's just absolutely like fascinating to see and to hear you speak about this stuff. So let's pinpoint you for a second. So you described yourself as chronically single. Tell us everything. Why?
All right. So for me, right, being single by all definitions is basically you're not in a relationship. So you can be single and still be dating people, but you're not in a defined relationship with another person or people. You can be single and sleeping with people, but you're still essentially single. Now, to me, the term chronically single is something I saw on TikTok, actually, so I need to credit TikTok. I didn't make up the phrase. But to me, it means that you have you've never dated, and you've never really had a boyfriend or girlfriend or partner, and you don't really date, and you're not really sleeping with anyone consistently or things like that. So you might have had a couple of situationships, or maybe like a 6-month relationship when you were 18. But in general, it can mean, so for some people, chronically single means they actually have never been on a date. They could still be a virgin. They don't date at all. And to other people, it can mean a bit more just like they just don't really date. They have been on a few dates in the past. They have slept with a few people in the past, but it's just like chronically single. So for me, what it means is, so I had one relationship about 2 years ago. Lovely boy. It was about 5 months long. And then other than that, that was it. I've been on a few dates here and there. I've slept with a few people here and there, but that's it. And like, I don't really actively date. I don't actively sleep with people. So for me, it's chronically single because there's actually nothing going on around me, if that makes sense. Whereas I've got friends who are single who, they'll go out and they'll sleep with someone like every other weekend or so, or they'll be going on like 2 dates a week or 2 days a month. So they're still single, but they're not that sort of like chronically single that I'm referring to, if that makes sense.
Happily so, right? Happily so.
Yeah. Oh my God, like by choice, and I have no complaints whatsoever. And I think one thing that I do say as well is like it depends on the type of person you are. So like, I've got some friends who like really want marriage and kids, and that's like their end goal. So for them, being chronically single is basically the end of the world. And they're like, no, I want marriage, I want kids, like I need this. And I'm like, yep, fair enough, like absolutely, like, we need to get you out there and do all that. Whereas like for me, marriage and kids, I'm not too fussed about. Like I don't have any strong preferences or opinions, so it's just like, well, it doesn't bother me. I'm very, very happy with it. So some people will definitely use that in a negative term, which each to their own, but for me, I'm fine.
Yeah. So what is your opinion on porn? So if we just if we take, I know you've probably touched upon this in your work, and it's become something more to you than it has to the everyday person, for instance, especially in your generation as well. So tell us like your opinion on porn, how it's presented in your life, and what you think sort of needs to change, if there is any changes.
Of course. So it's really interesting. I sort of have like 2 opinions. I've got like my work opinion of where I have like work with sex workers and people that have been in the porn industry. And then I have like my personal opinion as a viewer. So in terms of with my work point of view is, a lot of the sex workers that I have worked with, like it was all consensual. They love what they're doing. It's part of their job, and that's great and wonderful and like exactly what you want to hear. And if that's the decision people want to make, go crazy. Like whatever makes you happy, as long as it's safe and consensual, you can do what you want. And then from a personal point of view, so the first time I ever watched anything, I was 12, which feels ridiculously young, but I did speak to a few of my friends and they all sort of had the same sort of 12, 13 age brackets. So I was like, okay, that makes me feel better. And then I wouldn't say I was like consistently watching it up until I was like 23, but I think for the last maybe like from 18 to maybe like 23, it was quite regular that I was watching it. so back when I was in secondary school, Tumblr, before it got all shadow banned and censored, had so much porn on it. So it was just cool, like you'd be scrolling every day, like you couldn't open it up at school, and it would come up. So there was sort of like a lot of that where like I was involuntarily seeing stuff, which again, like I followed these accounts. It wasn't like unsolicited or anything, but there was just a lot going on. And then I think, I can't remember when, I mean, it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, actually longer than that, maybe like 6, 7 years ago, where it was released that Pornhub had a lot of videos on there, which were, so I think someone's, it was used in court, and it was to prove that someone was raped or sexually assaulted. And they had loads of videos on there without people's consent. There were loads of sexual assault videos and things like that. And there was a huge campaign around like banning Pornhub, which is now why all Pornhub videos are quotation marks verified. So when that sort of came out, I just sort of realized, obviously there's thousands, if not millions of videos there. And I was just like, oh my God, I was like, I don't know what I'm watching. And I never will, unless I am there on set talking to them before, during and after. I actually don't know what it is that I'm watching. And this whole campaign proved that, you know, literally thousands of videos had to be taken down because they were uploaded non-consensually. They were recorded without people's consent. It was assault, it was abuse. They were on drugs, they were drinking. And I can't remember when that came out. I feel like maybe I would have to research it. And I remember being really affected by it. There was a huge Twitter campaign. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm watching. Like, how can I continue watching this when I don't actually know what's happening? So obviously left like a really, really bad taste in my mouth. And I was like, right, cool, like I'm done. And then they obviously like re-released everything and had everything verified. And they were like, yeah, the process is, you know, not just anyone can upload. Now there's like a whole process and things like that. So I kind of had a break from it then, and I did look around for like more ethical sites, and I found like a couple of those which did look, I don't know, there was more like production value to it rather than someone just getting their camera and recording whatever it is they were recording. But then I would say, was it a year ago? Yeah, about a year ago. So in August last year, I like completely stopped because I was just like, I noticed that every time I tried to stop, I only lasted like 2 weeks, and I was like, that's a bit concerning, like, because I don't have an addiction, but clearly I must. If I can't go longer than a week or two, then that's a bit concerning.
But is this like without the porn, like you were still masturbating and using self-pleasure in between?
Yeah. So it wasn't, I could do like, yeah, without that. So then I stopped watching porn completely, August last year, and I actually switched over to audio porn, which was brilliant. Love it. Game changer. Shout out to Quinn.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I need to get into that. Right. So I need to look up audio porn because I've never listened to audio porn.
Game changer, like honestly, because I knew I had to replace it with something. I used to read like fan fiction when I was younger. I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but like sexy fan. It's basically like erotic. Yeah, but you're like 14 and like other 14-year-olds make it. So I used to read a lot of that, but like I can't read now. My attention span is non-existent. So I knew I had to replace it, but amazing. So I have Quinn, which is an app.
Right. Quinn, that's the name of the app.
Quinn.
Very interesting. You know what I'll be doing after?
Oh my God, no, honestly, have a listen because it just like, yeah, it's great. It's great. And I think as well, like, oh yeah, it's just great. I can't, yeah. Please listen and let me know what you think. Like, I'm so excited for you.
Okay, so do you have any experience with Erica Last? Have you ever watched any of her films?
No, I actually haven't. I think no, maybe back in the day I have, and I've heard really good things about them. But obviously now that I'm on a no watching anything,
but
I'm sort of
Yeah, so she is who, you know, you said you went on that journey of exploring like more ethical, ethically produced porn. She is who I came across when I went on the same journey, and I absolutely champion all of her work and what she does. I can't say that I have, like, again, it was so shameful and like taboo when I was growing up, porn, which obviously because, you know, a few decades before I was born was when sort of it blew up with like the development of film and how, you know, and in a patriarchal society where, you know, women were just used and it was awful. So, you know, again, the stigma is there for a reason. And if you think back like sort of 20 years ago when I was a teenager, it was like it was full of shame, and you know, even masturbation and self-pleasure and touching myself, that was all shameful. So there was no way I would have dared, you know, watch porn or anything like that. So for you to have gone on that journey and then also recognized one, your consumption habits and the content that you were consuming, like, is fascinating. And I, you know, that's something that I champion, because it's all about personal growth and education, isn't it? So that's just like fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and I'm glad that everyone gets to hear this. Absolutely. So you said that you've been with girls in the past and you're straight now.
Yes.
You had that relationship with a boy. So how was there a way that you reached that decision? Like, is there anything you can tell us about that journey?
No, like I can tell you about the journey. I could not tell you what changed. So yeah, from basically, since I basically always knew that I liked girls from a really young age, and just didn't think anything of it. It was just like, yep, okay, like that makes sense. Cool. I didn't really like struggle with anything or anything like that. I was just like, all right, like is what it is. Don't particularly really care too much about it. And then all throughout secondary school, I was like, yeah, no, definitely fancy girls, definitely find girls attractive, definitely be in a relationship with girls. And then I was with a few girls sort of like sexually over the years, and then went to university, like all of that. And then I got to maybe like 21, 22, and then just like a switch went off, and I was just like, oh, I was like, I'm straight, like nothing happened. I didn't have a bad experience with anyone. Like, I don't know, it just slowly, like I just sort of realized like, oh, I actually just don't like girls like that anymore. And I was like, oh, okay. And then that was it. So now which is so weird, because like to know from such a young age and to be so sure and be like, no, like, you know, like literally from the ages of like 6 to 21, like what's that, many years. And I just then all of a sudden I just sort of it just changed, and I could not tell you why. I could not tell you what happened.
I think that is so fascinating, because one of the things that I try and teach and try and sort of like research, and I just find it fascinating, is how fluid sexuality is. So sexuality and all it encompasses, if that's the right word, it's just so fluid, isn't it? Because you're not always going to be the same person. We change like year on year, month on month, week on week. We're not always going to like the same things. We're not going to want to experience the same things. We're not going to, you know, our boundaries and stuff are going to move. The posts are going to move, and we're going to want to experience new things. And it is so fluid. And I think you've just demonstrated that like perfectly. It doesn't matter, does it, what you're fancying at whatever point. The point is you're being true to yourself. And that's exactly what I think more people need, you know, confirmation of. Not that people should seek like external validation, but they absolutely should know that it's acceptable and that it's okay to be like that and to go with the flow.
And I think as well, which I like really like about myself, is like I was never confused, like in terms of like, okay, like I knew that, and then I knew this, and I wasn't trying to like battle or pinpoint or try and work out. I was just like, okay, well, I know this, and that's fine. Like, I don't need to argue with anyone. I don't need to argue more importantly with myself about it. It just happened. And, you know, I have conversations with people now, and they're just like, oh, like maybe this happened, or maybe that happened, or, you know, maybe you should try it again. And I'm like, well, no, like I'm good. You can try it if you want to, but I've done it. I've been there, done that. Like, been there, done that, wrote the book. Like, it's so it's really interesting, because obviously this development was only in the last maybe like 2-3 years or so. But yes.
Oh, I love it. It's just such a perfect example. So what advice would you give to someone exploring their sexuality? So let me just add that I absolutely love how you've said that it was just you. Like it was just so like you're normal, right? And then like, and you absolutely just flowed through that decision. Whereas I think that and I do think that your sex education and those open conversations would have contributed to that. Because if I think about people my age, even now people are so, you know, filled with shame around sexuality that they wouldn't even express it in sort of their relationships and in private. And I get that a lot, and I get lots of women speak to me and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're speaking about this out loud. Like, I really need to speak to someone about this. And they're not speaking to their partners about it. They're not speaking to, their friends about it. And it's crazy. So I love that you're just like a perfect example of all that is good with, how sex education is changing. It's just fascinating. So having said that, how would you then what advice would you give to someone who is exploring their sexuality?
So I think my number one advice is like, it's fun, like it's not a chore, it's exciting. It's not pressure. Like, you need to do things at your own pace. Like, I had some people lose their virginity that I know at the age of 13. I had others who were 25. It's, everything is at your own pace. I think if I'm speaking to like a young person or someone at like secondary school, chances are it's going to change. So don't get so pinpointed like on finding the exact right word to describe your sexuality or your gender or things like that, because like things will change as you get older, and like it's meant to be fun. And I think, find a group of people that you can talk to about this. I think that's so important. And like you said, it's been a huge part of my upbringing that, we're telling each other, whether we want to know or not, we're telling each other so much information about ourselves and things like that. And like it's never ending exploring your sexuality. There's no end point. Like I've said, I liked girls for the majority of my life, and now I don't. So it's ongoing, and like understand that it's a journey. It's not an end goal. It's a journey. I think that's the most important thing. And then find other people to confide in as well, I think is my second biggest point.
That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. I love it. So I think you've said so much. I'm so excited for other people to hear this interview. But is there anything else that you would add to any of that?
I think, this is going to sound maybe like really odd advice, but for me, it's something that I sort of wish I could tell like my younger self, and what I sort of always have told like my younger cousins and younger friends as well, is this may seem so simple, but like sleep with people that actually like you and actually are attracted to you. And I know that seems like, well, duh, obviously, but it's so easy not to. I think especially when you're younger, especially if you've got insecurities, especially if you're not confident, I think at the very least they need to like you and be attracted to you, and that will just make a whole lot of difference. And I know, like I said, it sounds like standard behavior, but it's so easy not to. And I'd really like to like instill that into people, where I'm just like, well, if they're not willing to take you out on a date and that's what you want, then they're probably not worth it. Even if you're enjoying their attention, even if you think they're really attracted to you or really attracted to them, like set your standard and don't sort of lower them. Like, if you're happy of not going on a date with that person, by all means, that's fine. But if you have that standard of like, oh, actually I would, but I guess for him or for them, like, I'll just not do that. No, don't ever do that. Then like they're not going to be special enough if they can't reach out, which is something I've been teaching myself for the past sort of like 10 years, where it's just like there's no need to lower the standards.
I absolutely love that, and we're going to get that in writing and put that all over this episode and in the notes and stuff, because it's just like perfect advice. It's so exciting. And also, like, I think the point is explore with yourself first. Use masturbation.
Absolutely.
Use masturbation, use self-pleasure, and enjoy your body first. Get comfortable with, I mean, when even just being naked, and if you're laying on your bed naked with your legs open, you're vulnerable. And this is how you're presenting when you're having sex and enjoying pleasure with other people. So if you can get comfortable with being in that vulnerability with yourself first, and exploring what gives you pleasure, what you don't like, putting in those boundaries, then you're going to have better sex anyway, because you're going to be able to teach them how to give you pleasure, right?
Yes.
So
perfect. I think, just following on to that, exactly that, where like, you need to know yourself like first. Like, yes, exploring sexuality with other people is great and exciting, but I do feel like you need to do that with yourself almost like first.
Definitely,
before you go on to that. So that's another important thing, like being comfortable naked. Oh my gosh, so important. And again, that confidence comes through when you are exploring stuff and knowing your boundaries and what you like. So absolutely, that as well is another key thing. Thank you for bringing that up as well, because that's something I'm also really passionate about, where it's just like, you also don't necessarily need other people to be having fun and to learn about yourself. So yeah, perfect. Thank you for bringing that up.
You told us that anyway with your experiences, because you're quite happy enjoying yourself and enjoying your body, aren't you? And you've gone on this journey with your sexuality, a solo journey as well, because you've experienced the experiences with porn and stuff like that. So you've absolutely demonstrated how it could be done. And I think if going forward, and sort of like, I've got teenage children now, and their sex education is still not really where I think it should be. The changes are there, and we've just demonstrated the massive changes between my sex education and your sex education. But absolutely, that sex education should start with self-pleasure and masturbation, because that is absolutely where
where it all begins. And when you're learning sex education at, if you're doing it at primary school or early secondary school, like, I'm sorry, you shouldn't be having sex at the age of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, even 13. It's not, and we definitely absolutely have to learn about that and understand that, about STIs, contraception, how you get pregnant. Like, absolutely, we still need to learn that basics. But at the end of the day, a lot of people won't then be having sex until potentially their late teenage years or their early 20s. So we need to focus on the bit in between that, or even like things like oral sex and things like that. Like, we need to focus on that bit there, because maybe as a teenager you might explore that before you actually do have like penetrative sex.
Oh my god, I can't say that.
What I mean, everyone else know what I mean. It's fine. It's like, before even like moving on to that, like, that's something that we should learn about, which can, like, quotation marks, like, ease you in. And then again, same with like queer sex education and stuff like that. That's not the same for LGBTQ plus people. So again, we should be focusing on, we're very much like P and V sex, I think.
Yes.
Which obviously we do absolutely have to learn about, and I completely agree with that. But all the bits in between before we get to that point, there's so much in between that needs to be talked about, especially to young people, especially primary school age, especially secondary school age. That needs to be talked about more. And I think sex education should go on till you're at university, to be fair. Like, I think there should be something in there, because at university, like, you're 18, that's still so young. Like, that is still so young. But I can't believe that we're allowed to move out at 18 to go to university. It doesn't make sense to me, because I was a child.
I was already in an abusive relationship at 17 and pregnant with my first child at 19. Like, it's absolutely outrageous. But let's not leave it there. I'm happily married now.
Really happy for you.
I've gone on a massive journey of sexuality, like, since that time, because obviously I didn't have I didn't have a sex education. Then I was thrown into this abuse, and where all of my sense of self was taken away from me anyway. And then upon coming out of that, I went on this massive journey of, like, exploring my sexuality. And absolutely the key to getting me back and being the person that I am today was exploring my body and my sexuality and being comfortable in my vulnerability. So it doesn't matter. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, do you think as well, because we've spoken a lot about sex, but it's usually like sex and relationships. Do you think if you had a better sex and relationship education at school, where we did speak about consent and boundaries and things like that, do you think that would have, like, affected your life differently?
Absolutely. And that is one thing that I always say, like, if I'd had a comprehensive sex education, would I have been in an abusive relationship? Of course, I may well have been in an abusive relationship, but would I have been able to escape sooner? Absolutely. I absolutely think, like, it was that knowledge and, the space. There was lots of things that contributed to me finding the strength to leave that situation. But along the way, when it was happening to me, and probably in the first couple of years, like at the grooming stage, then I would have been able to recognize what was happening. You know what I mean? So again, it comes down to that education. So yes.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Like, this conversation has been amazing. I know that everyone is going to learn so much from you, and I'm so grateful that you were here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.